Hello guys, today I just wanted to make a quick tip video. Whether you're subscribed to the Artbana box or not, this video will be posted on my YouTube channel for you, and of course it has to do with painting and building confidence in a certain technique of painting, which is something that a lot of my students struggle with over time. So I wanted to just do a quick little tutorial video, my tips and tricks, if you will, on creating fine lines and points. So two versions basically of the same thing. We'll get into that in a minute. But I know it's something that people can struggle with when painting that can be really frustrating. So I'm going to hopefully give you some tips that you can practice, in your creative practice, and bring to your next practice with Artbana if you're a subscriber. Or in your projects at home. So first of all, what I want to go over with you guys is your brush. I have a lot of people ask me, like, what's your favorite brush? What's the best brand of brush? And on and on. And really, I like to say that choosing your brushes for your creative practice is really like fine wine. Okay, so it really just depends on your taste and what you like. I have brushes that are over $25 a piece that I love, and I have brushes that are less than $1 a piece that I love. And it just depends what you're using it for. They'll all have different uses, and I guarantee you that after you use enough brushes enough times, you'll know which ones you're grabbing for that you like the best. Kind of like shoes, your favorite pair of shoes. Which ones are the most comfy? Which ones do you like to wear the most? So brushes are the same way. There's nothing that's going to make a brush the best brush ever that's going to make you a better artist. That's not really how it works. I'm a firm believer in choosing quality products, but also choosing products that help you get the results you're after. And, no, this brush isn't going to make you a better painter than this brush, if that makes sense. So sometimes it's easy to get hung up on that, but anyways, I'll stop talking so much about brushes. But brush choice is important for fine line drawing because certain brushes are not going to give you a fine line. For example, hoping you guys can see in front of my dark sweater, this brush is never going to give you a fine line. Okay, this will give you like a really big thick line. I guess if you can see the painting behind me, some of those white lines going across the butterfly wings, they're nice and thick because that's a pretty big canvas. This might give you a line like that. It's never going to give you a fine line like a tree branch or something. So if your brush is all round and fat and kind of fraying out, not the one you want to use. Now, also, flat brushes are really great for fine lines, believe it or not. If you're able to use this flat part of the brush, you can see that's a little thinner. Depending on how much paint you use, we're going to go into that. That will be able to give you a fine line in certain instances. Now, just like this brush was all frayed and kind of fat, I never, well, I shouldn't say never. I don't usually throw these away because they're good for other applications in painting. So I keep those around even if they're kind of fluffy. But flat brushes can also get kind of fluffy, whereas they're not going to give you as great of a fine line. You can see that flat brush is quite a bit fatter than this one. So this one isn't going to give you as good of a line either. So you want, one that's still nice and crispy. If you're going to be doing line work with a flat brush like that. Again, doesn't matter the width that way necessarily. Depending on how long you're drawing your lines, you might want to use a wider one or a shorter one. Brushes are very adaptable, especially as you learn more confidence in what you're creating, what you're after. Again, there's another one you could use. You can adapt your brushes. Angular brushes, you can use them for fine lines. They're not my favorite because you have this angle to contend with as well. There might be certain applications that you want to do that. So those are an option. I have a bunch there. Again, here I'm just stressing this because sometimes people just get frustrated and they don't realize it's their brush. If your brush is fluffy, this used to be a pointy brush like this, but it's been used. This will not give you a very good line. It'll give you a thick line. So these are going to be your top brushes for making fine lines. You can see they're nice and pointed. These are called round brushes usually. These are part of the Artvana set, and I have the 5.0, which is the smallest, and the 2. That's another thing for a whole nother video, is brush sizing. Not very consistent across brands, we'll just put it that way. But you want, something that has a nice point on it still, because that's what's going to give you a smaller mark, okay? So making lines is just making marks. And I'm going to tilt the camera a little bit so you guys can see my work down here. Not my face. So first of all, what I'm going to go through for you guys is paint consistency. So I also have had some people ask me what type of paint will give the best line. And that's kind of like the brush conundrum that we just talked about. Like, it's not really the paint itself that's going to give you a good line or not, just like it's not the brush. But I do recommend right here, I'm just using black today. I have a heavy body acrylic or a thick body, which means the paint is pretty thick and can be globby. Okay, so it's not that you can't use this paint, but I always want to add a little bit of water because it's easier to draw with ink. Okay, so if you're doing really fine detail work, it's going to be hard to get a fine line with a big glob of paint, right? So you want to get your consistency right. Okay, so you should be able to pull this paint smoothly across, and that's going to be about the right consistency. They do make fluid acrylics, which can be really nice for line work. They're already smoother like that, so that's something you could use, but you certainly can use any paint. Once you become more confident in what you're trying to do, you'll know, okay, this paint's too thick, okay, it's too thin, and you'll know the consistency that you're going for. And that's what this exercise is really going to help you do, okay? I wish there was a tip that I could give you guys that would just make you awesome at drawing lines. But fine line detail work is really all about practice. Practice, 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 practice. But if you don't want to ruin a bunch of paintings trying to practice, I recommend just getting an extra canvas, or I have some just spare watercolor paper here. Watercolor paper and canvas act differently, so you might want to try on both. Sorry about that, guys. But once you have your paint consistency correct, what I like to have people do, one thing you can start practicing with is, you can see here, just kind of a meditative swirl drawing. You can see I have different thicknesses of lines. Basically just filling paper, having different directional strokes, seeing how long it takes your paint to run out when you're drawing a line. That's somewhere that I see people struggle sometimes. They'll be drawing and then they run out of paint, and then they'll have to reload and start, and sometimes they can get some marks in there that they don't like. The other thing is pressure, okay? Before we even start painting, I'm going to talk about pressure, because actually I'm going to show you with painting. Pressure is a huge part of drawing a fine line. So even if you have the smallest brush, your paint consistency is perfect, you can still make a thin line or a thicker line. So if I use really light pressure, okay, like I'm going to steady my hand. I'm barely going to let this brush touch the paper, okay? It's like barely touching. It's going to give me a nice teeny tiny line, okay? Okay, barely any pressure, nice tiny line. Same brush, same paint. If I push a little harder, controlling that pressure in my fingers. Thicker line. If I push even harder, thicker line. And then for this last one, if I plant that brush, almost if you max that brush out, you're pushing the bristle almost all the way down. You have complete control over your line at this point because your brush bristle isn't going to be able to move much more, but it's going to give you a very thick line. Okay, same brush, 4 different pressures. So pressure is very important, and that's why I like to use this next exercise for people, because it will take you through a lot of different things all at once. And one more important thing is fat brush. So sometimes when you're mixing that water into your paint, it can get kind of pushed up into your bristle. You always want to make sure that you have a nice point on your brush before you're starting. So whether you clean that brush back out or you just re-point it in your paper towel and go into your paint, you're going to want to do that. So the best practice, besides the line drawing that I just showed you, even better than that, especially if you need something more structured, is drawing the alphabet. Okay? Because when you're drawing letters, it's going to take you through different wrist motions. It's going to force you to practice maintaining pressure, whatever that pressure is that you're going for, whether it's really fine, or you can practice increasing pressure in the front of the A. I'll show you here in a minute. Releasing it towards the back, pushing again on the leg. And you're going to start seeing different effects of pressure, and you're also going to be able to practice how you're planting your hand and how you're able to move your hand as you move through the alphabet. And this can be frustrating at first, but like I said, it's just going to take lots of pressure. Here I'm doing like a feather texture, just barely touching that paper. My paint is fluid enough that I can still get a good line. You can see I can get really nice thin lines. These are really small. You know, this is only a computer-sized piece of paper. So this is going to be a pretty small line. And I encourage you to just, whenever you have free time, or maybe before you're about to start a painting, get even a little thinner there. You know, have a practice pad of paper or canvas and just pull that out and kind of get yourself into the groove there. I don't remember which letter was coming next. So I just think that, you know, drawing these letters is a great way to practice different line widths, different pressures, you know, even different brushes. If you want to try it with one of those flat brushes, it's going to be harder to do the alphabet with a flat brush. But I can show you here what I mean by being able to, again, pressure again. So these are more for straight lines, but using that thin edge or the corner of this brush. Thin line, a little bit more pressure, thicker line. You can really see what shapes you can create with which brushes. So obviously I can't, you know, I wouldn't be able to get this thick of a line with this brush unless I use it like this. Okay. So that is just a place where I would have you start to really start mastering those fine line skills. Also, if you have a little bit of a shake, sometimes whether you've had a lot of coffee or if you're an older painter, sometimes we have a little bit of shake, and that can be really frustrating as well. My advice for that is to really pay attention to the plant of your hand. And if it's a prominent shake, sometimes you're going to have to work with what you got there. But it is possible. And just planting that hand and maintaining that connection between your brush and the paper will kind of help stabilize those little vibrations. So I hope this helps you to increase your confidence in drawing fine lines. The last thing I will say on fine lines is a lot of times we think those lines need to be thinner than they actually do. And subtlety is huge. You know, the smallest little marks uh, can make a big difference in our painting. So sometimes we don't have to like draw a full line like that. We can even just barely trace that in with a different color or something like that to make the illusion of that barrier. So it really depends on what you're working on, which painting you're in, the application of this, but I hope that this gives you a broad starting place in a way that you can practice your hand, your pressure, your brush, and then your paint consistency. So there's a lot of things that go into it, and it's really going to be fine tuning what helps you to create confidently when you're trying to make those lines in your paintings. So I hope that's helpful, guys, and I would love to see any examples of you using this. So go ahead and post those in the Artbana group on Facebook. It's going to be Artbana, Your Creative Practice, and I will see you next time.